Okay, let's talk about the Supreme Court allowing Texas to enforce controversial immigration law before we get to some Israel stuff. Sadly, PBS is still doing worse. From 3 weeks ago, here's PBS NewsHour sharing the diary of an Israeli soldier involved in a genocide, presenting him just an everyday guy. The fact that they included this clip of him talking about the smell of the dead bodies in Gaza is horrific. Shame on you. Wow. It's unsurprising. Thank you to PBS for that. All right, let's watch this one.
Now to our breaking news, the Supreme Court allowing Texas to begin enforcing its controversial immigration law.
We're joined now by Joan Biskupik. Joan, what do you make of this decision? Just yesterday, it was put on hold indefinitely. Now they're letting Texas move forward with enforcement of this law.
Yeah, Boris, when they put it on hold indefinitely last night, they were only doing it because they weren't ready to issue this order. It wasn't anything final. They just essentially bought themselves a few more hours of time. This is very, very big. It's saying that this law that allows Texas to arrest and detain people who cross the border and are suspected of entering the country illegally, for Texas to use its own law enforcement powers against them, that really flies in the face of decades and decades of federal immigration law. And the Biden administration had challenged this Texas law. It's commonly known as SB 4. It was signed by Governor Abbott back in December, really taking a hard law enforcement effort against people crossing the border. The administration had said, you can't do this. Federal immigration is our concern. And the merits of this dispute are playing out in lower courts. But the question was, should this law be allowed to take effect? A lower district court judge had said no, put the court on the law on hold while the legal proceedings play out. But today, the Supreme Court ensured that that law can go forward. Now, just so you know, only 3 justices dissented here, and they were the liberal justices, Justices Sonia Sotomayor, Ketanji Brown Jackson, and Elena Kagan. And I'll just read briefly from their dissent, because the majority itself did not explain itself. It just, had an order that said that Texas can enforce this. 2 justices on the right did concur in that, and I'll get to that in a second, but I just want to explain what the dissenters wrote. They said, today the court invites further chaos and crisis in immigration enforcement. Texas passed a law that directly regulates the entry and removal of non-citizens and explicitly instructs its state courts to disregard ongoing federal immigration proceedings. That law upends federal state balance of power that has existed for over a century. That's what Justices Sotomayor and Jackson wrote. And then Justice Kagan wrote separately, the subject of immigration generally and the entry and removal of non-citizens particularly are matters long thought the special province of the federal government. And that's kind of the crux of the argument, even though this is playing out in such human terms at the border. This was kind of a very legal separation from the federal government from the states issue that came up to the court. And the justices, the majority at least, felt that...
What happened to give me your sick and needy? No, we haven't even... Dude, we're so far removed from that. But beyond that, this is literally an objectively racist law. Okay, you can't just like try to codify racial discrimination. Like, how do you make the assertion that someone is potentially an undocumented migrant? Because I suspect that they're not going to be asking white people to show them their papers. This will look exactly like stop and frisk, and this will look exactly like the identical legislation that failed in Arizona. I've talked about this before. This is a direct violation of the Constitution. It's kind of crazy that they're just like going along with this. And before people go like, oh, well, you could do this. It's like Papers, Please. No, it's worse. Because in Papers, Please, okay, you do that, or in Contraband Police, you do that at a fucking border checkpoint. That happens already. This is beyond that. This is literally anyone and everyone being like, oh, you're brown. Let me see your papers. Oh, well, now I'm going to hold you up. Oh, now I'm going to call the K-9 unit. Oh, now I'm going to search your car. Beginning in this moment, Texas law enforcement officers can just arrest any person in the state they believe crossed illegally, and judges can now order people to walk back into Mexico at a threat of 20 years in prison if they don't, even if the person has federal permission to be there. Crucial context. Barrett and Kavanaugh both say they are not making any decision right now because of the weird procedural posture by which it made it to the court's shadow docket, but say if the Fifth Circuit doesn't act ASAP, they may change their minds. So Barrett and Kavanaugh basically say the Fifth Circuit's gamesmanship around issuing an administrative stay is unusual, but doesn't rise to the point where she thinks they should intervene yet, but says if the Fifth Circuit doesn't rule soon, the DOJ should come back to SCOTUS. So what does this mean? Is this just not stop and frisk? It sounds like it. Basically, that's what I said. I mean, it's in some ways it's like even worse than stop and frisk. Because stop and frisk doesn't like deport black people. or like basically say, well, you're black, so you are getting deported. Halt and vault. Yeah. You are fucking racist? Me? Yeah, no, totally. I'm racist because I believe that at the top of the hour there's a 3-minute ad break and you're going to have to see it unless you subscribe. Yeah, it's true. I am racist towards those who are unsubscribed. Yeah, it's pretty fucked up, I know. Now, like I said, if you no longer want to see him, all you need to do... Wait, hold on. When are you? We can do an hour. Illegal migration belong to all race? Yeah. Yeah, no, thank you. You're right. I was being racist when I said this historically has only been used against brown people because it's basically giving a constitutional right, which is unconstitutional inherently, but a right to, it's basically giving a go-ahead to all law enforcement officers to just like harass brown people that they suspect of being an undocumented migrant. Okay? You're right. I should be living in Reddit world instead of the real fucking world where, you know, laws like this have passed in our recent history and have failed afterwards or gotten struck down due to their obvious unconstitutional nature. Just like stop and frisk is for all people to find guns, even though it was stopping and frisking 94% black people, even though white people and black people had guns at the same rate on them, it seems, and was objectively a failure, unless you consider it to be a law to harass random black people, in which case it was not a failure. So what does this mean? Well, this means SB4 is in effect for now, but the case is likely going to go back to the Supreme Court on emergency poster within the next month, either because the Fifth Circuit rules officially on the stay motion or because they wait too long and don't. I agree with this point. Both Barrett and Kavanaugh basically opted out of deciding the merits, and for all we know, so did Roberts, Gorsuch, Thomas, and Alito, who gave no indication of why they ruled how they did. Regardless, the fifth gets leeway. I would not interpret today's order as a surefire sign that 5 justices will uphold SB 4 or even allow it to remain in effect for very long. Barrett and Kavanaugh are telling the Fifth Circuit, we'll tolerate your gamesmanship this time, but you're on notice that we dislike it. Kind of crazy. The bigger point here is that, once again, this SCOTUS permits Fifth Circuit to temporarily overturn longstanding immigration law rules, even if they eventually strike down the law. They did this with Remain in Mexico in 2021 and the enforcement priorities in 2022. Don't forget how this could be used against the O-Irish as well as Up the Raw. Stands with migrants everywhere. What? Oh. I think this kind of gamesmanship is really fucking indecent, especially at a time when the Supreme Court is very worried about their vibes overall. When the Supreme Court is very worried about the way that people see them. So, you know. But yeah, we got Federalist Society in the building, baby. This is how it works. I remember growing up with hearing about the SB 1070 bill in Arizona, the racially profiled people they suspect of being an undocumented immigrant. It's insane seeing these same bills again. Yup.